What I've done with my clients, and they've had transformative results, is start with the foundation, start with the fundamentals first, right? And now your self-esteem and self-confidence skyrockets. You're able to stick to a consistent routine. You can show yourself that, you can show me as your coach that, but more important than that, you show your spouse that. You show your children that.
What's the point in achieving a great deal of success if I'm not around to enjoy it or share it with other people?
We all know what to do. I mean, let's be real. We all know we're not supposed to eat X food at X time of day. We all know where we should work out. We all know we shouldn't drink a bunch of alcohol, right? But why don't we do it?
There's no reason to sit there and say we don't have enough time. However, we're going to make what time we have really count. I am so excited because this is a really special episode. We have an amazing guest on, but also we had a really special accomplishment this week, a milestone.
We hit 10,000 downloads. Thank you guys. Thank you so much for listening and supporting us. It means the world to us. And we are so thrilled to continue producing the show and taking it to new heights.
Yes. Thank you guys. Today we have Dr. Akash Bajaj on the show with us. Dr. Akash, welcome.
Thank you. And congratulations, guys, on that download number. That's truly remarkable. You guys should be very proud of yourselves.
Thank you. Yeah, we're really humbled. And you know what's actually humbling is the number of countries the show has been listened in. And I think it's like 65 different countries, 300 different cities, over 10,000 downloads. Obviously, we're skewed to the US and Canada and Europe, but you'll flip through the list of countries and you'll see like Papua New Guinea or something like that. And
awesome.
It's super humbling. There's no words for. I've never experienced anything like that. To feel that something we produce in our homes is touching so many people. You and I met through Instagram, and we actually worked with a mentor together. And I've just been blown away by everything you're doing. And for listeners, as you know, the demographic of this podcast, most of our listeners are, professional South Asians, entrepreneurial South Asians, in their 20s, 30s, or 40s. And a lot of us are very focused on our health. We understand that wealth without health is useless, and health without energy is also of not great consequence. And Akash is just not only is he like triple or quadruple board certified, but he focuses on performance medicine, anti-aging, longevity, all of the things that really underpin what we're trying to do with our lives and our professional lives. Because, what's the point in achieving a great deal of success if we're not around to enjoy it or share it with other people? So Akash, give us a quick introduction about who you are, what's your expertise, and why you do what you do.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me on the show, first and foremost. So yeah, as you stated, my name is Akash Bajaj, and my training, I can kind of give you a quick run through that and what brought me to kind of where I'm at in my practice and my focus currently. But I am board certified by 3 individual boards. I originally started my training in New York City in medical school. And while in New York City, I was actually a first responder for the 9/11 events. So my original plans of staying in New York actually changed, and I ended up completing my training in Los Angeles just because that event really demonstrated to me the ephemeral nature of life and how important it is to be close to the ones that you really love. It also kind of opened my eyes into beginning to explore this new field of anti-aging and longevity, because I began to think at that point, well, if we don't really know when our clock is going to kind of punch out, or we don't really know when that day comes for us, it's very important for us to try to figure out a way to maximize our time while we have it every single day. And so that kind of mindset really started me exploring down that road. But way back then, I'm talking 2001 or 2002, this whole field didn't really exist. So I originally became an anesthesiologist. And after completing anesthesiology, I did further training in San Francisco, UCSF, in what's called pain management. The reason I chose pain management at that point is really because those patients were also patients who were almost accelerating their aging due to chronic pain issues that are frankly untreated, or treated in a way that didn't really help them get past the underlying problems, but really treated their symptoms. For example, really treatment of choice at that point for those types of patients was heavy opioid prescribing. If it hurts, take pain medications. And if it still hurts, take more, right? That was really the fundamentals of it. And I countered a few patients where really that didn't work. And these patients really suffered at the end stages of their life. So after pursuing pain management, I started my own pain management practice in the Los Angeles, California area. And I began to treat these patients. And my kind of, I guess, growth through the pain management space really exposed a lot of the fundamental, what I believe, fundamental problems in modern medicine. And some of those things are that, we as doctors, we tend to treat only symptoms. If you come in with pain in your knee, we're trained in traditional medical training to think, all right, I'm going to look at that knee. I'm going to figure out what's going on with that knee. I'm going to treat it with either a medication, an injection, or surgery primarily. And then you're off, right? And if something else is still hurting, well, you need to go see that other specialist.
Mhm.
And, this just didn't sit really well with me, even though it was very effective. I would have these patients come back over and over saying, Doc, what you did really helped, but the pain has returned. Something else is hurting now. I have this chronic issue, whatever the case may be. And then I just
Yeah.
began to see this pattern in many patients. And this pattern exposed to me the fact that we're a little too myopic in a sense of treating that particular issue when there's something most likely far more systemic going on, and we need to take a broader look.
Mm.
So going through traditional pain management at that point, we ran through the gamut of medications, opioid medications, like I stated, and then the whole field of pain management started going into just injection-based therapies. Okay, let's try to inject a bunch of steroid in the affected area, and
Mhm.
that'll help you feel better. And it certainly did help you feel better. But the problem then became you can only have so many of those a year. The pain would return. Typically, the pain relief was very temporary because you're
Mhm.
using a medication to essentially decrease the symptoms, but not fix or treat or heal anything. And then that started me down a path of looking at, well, how can we fix this without surgery?
Mhm.
Because the reality is, surgery is a fantastic option for the right patient. But surgery itself can also open up a whole new Pandora's box of a whole new set of problems. And patients that have gone through surgery can probably relate to this. Spine surgery, hip surgery, shoulder surgery, whatever the case may be, oftentimes very effective, but sometimes, unfortunately, not so effective. And you're kind of trading one problem for another. So I began to look at things like regenerative medicine. And things like PRP or platelet rich plasma came into focus, stem cell therapy, specifically treating these affected localized joints. And that was very effective, very promising technology, which then, and at that point, really, the pandemic hit.
Right.
And the pandemic changed everybody's lives. One thing that I noticed in my practice is a lot of these patients were having these global issues now. And my, fancy injections and all my fancy training really couldn't help them get to where they needed to get and get them feeling better, increase their functionality, increase their ability to play with their children or grandchildren, just kind of increase their quality of life, right? Because their health span was decreasing so rapidly, and their lifespan really was inconsequential at that point. Because what is the point of living to 100 years old if those last 20 years are just really, really poor health, and you're actually more of a burden on other people and a
Mhm.
psychological burden, frankly, on yourself?
Yeah.
So at that point, I obtained a third board certification in anti-aging and regenerative medicine during the pandemic. And that really kind of broadened my practice base to the point now where I specifically focus on this field of medicine. And my focus specifically in the anti-aging and longevity space isn't so much aesthetic. There's a very large need and demand, frankly, for that space. But I really focus on helping our patients systemically from the inside and having the outside be more of a manifestation of how healthy they actually are. And a lot of those problems kind of take care of themselves. And that's
Mhm.
really the focus of what I do today.
I love that you mentioned that because I mean, I find myself reminding myself of this fundamental concept, right? We don't attract what we want. We attract based on who we're being, right? And if you're fundamentally internally, in need of something that's not being addressed, that's going to that's going to show up externally. And so I love that you talk about, let's get to the root cause of things. Let's look at this from a different angle. Because quite frankly, what we've done so far, it just isn't working as well as we'd like it to. So this is a welcome and fresh perspective that you're bringing.
Great. I appreciate that. And, this is not something that I came up with by any means. The great Peter Attia really expresses it the best when he calls it medicine 3.0. And
Mm-hmm.
medicine 3.0 is really kind of what we're talking about. Medicine 1.0 is more like, hey, you have an infection. Let's give you some sort of antibiotic so you don't die from a cold. Medicine 2.0 is really more of modern medicine as we know it, traditional medicine as we know it. You have a problem in your knee, hip, shoulder, ankle, whatever. Let's treat that specific problem and move on. But medicine 3.0 is exactly what we're talking about. And fortunately, I think more and more people are beginning to realize they have the power. We all have the power, guys, to take our health into our own hands. And we have the power without a lot of doctors, frankly, without a lot of medications. There's so many things that we can do that are free, that are or inexpensive, that are completely within our control to completely alter the course of our health and our life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as more and more people get exposed to this and they get educated about this, which is primarily what my platform is intended to do, they get coached on this with somebody experienced, which is precisely what we do. They can really steer the course of their Titanic away from that iceberg and to safer waters. And that's exactly what we're talking
A
about.
lot of what you said, Akash, resonates in that, I, like Dinesh, have aging parents that need care. And it's really incredible to see that shift. I was talking to one of my parents this past weekend, and I mentioned this idea of, you as the patient actually are the driver as to how to move forward. And that was just such a foreign concept, especially growing up in India. His whole concept was like, well, we go to the doctor because the doctor knows, right? And wholly placing our care on what happens, versus having it be a more collaborative approach and a more empowered approach, like you're bringing to the table.
You bring up a great point, which is this is maybe a new thing for us. Our generation is being exposed to this. I think our children's generation is going to know this as their new normal. But we're in a very unique and special place. Those of us in roughly this age bracket with children and with parents, right? If we're blessed to still have that, because we've seen the mentality and the psychology of our parents, God bless them, but we also see how maybe it wasn't as effective as it could have been.
Also, we as a generation are more empowered and involved, and we're more direct advocates of our health and our family's health, as opposed to in years gone by. There's an educated figure who was a doctor, and you just listened to everything they said without even being disrespectful or questioning it. But Akash, just to cut straight to it, there's this rise of this medical influencer, right? There's a lot of doctors on social media,
Right.
a lot of information in mainstream. We mentioned Peter Attia, there's Dave Asprey, there's lots of people who are putting out information about how we can improve our health span, how we can live longer. Who's the guy, Brian, who's trying to live to like 200, Brian
Yeah,
Johnson
Brian
or something?
Johnson, I believe.
Right. And he's like transfusing his blood and, moving
Yeah.
things from one part of his body and all that stuff.
Hmm.
But as South Asians, and I'm hazarding a guess that's a bit of a generalization, we don't even have time to go to the doctor when we're not feeling well, right? We've got kids, we've got cavities that are brewing, we've got aches, and
No.
we'll just hopefully it goes away, or we'll tough it through or something. We don't even go to the doctor when we need to for a regular checkup. But medicine 3.0 is a little bit different, right? It's more of a proactive approach where you're getting your blood drawn, you're doing these food allergy testing, you're in partnership and more cadence with the physician. Help our audience understand, what of that that we're seeing or we're being told in mass media or in podcasts or things like that is real, or how much of it is sort of social media, people trying to push various types of testing and genomic testing and food sensitivity testing or supplements. There's liposomal vitamin C, there's regular vitamin C, there's restore IV therapy. there's a lot of clutter out there, and we're hoping to
Sure.
set the record straight with some advice from, like a trusted source, a good friend, and an expert in the field.
Yeah, you listen, I'm glad you brought that up, and that's a very good point. It kind of goes back to what we were chatting about a little bit earlier before we started recording, which is, especially males in general, we have like kind of a tendency to collect things and to get better gear all the time. And
Mhm.
this also applies to our health, right? Like you can go out there now and you can buy 10 different trackers for your health. And
Yeah.
you can get overwhelmed with this. You can be on 3 or 4 different types of supplements at the same time and probably have a bunch of redundancies in that as well. And frankly, a lot of it might not be doing anything.
Hmm.
So how do you really cut through it? Here's what I've learned in my experience. And a lot of this is based on, the data that's out there. A lot of this is practical advice, guys, just that I've seen anecdotally and frankly that I've tried myself, which is you don't necessarily need to have the biggest, best, most amazing thing on the block at this point. It's fantastic marketing, super slick, lots of money into that marketing to get you to buy that expensive product. But at the end of the day, what I've done with my clients, and they've had transformative results, is start with the foundation, start with the fundamentals first, right? And I'll go into those in a moment. But once you get those fundamentals really dialed in, and this could be, a 1 to 2 month process just to do that alone, depending on how motivated that particular person is.
Hmm.
That alone will tackle 60 to 70% of your problems.
Hmm.
And then all this other cool stuff that we have access to, it's amazing we have access to so much in the world today, but B, you can now precisely pick what you actually need, which will actually provide you with measurements that you can take action on, not just look at and say that's cool, and tweak that last 20 to 30% to get yourself totally badass, to that totally
Yeah.
optimized, totally unbreakable. So when a client comes to me and let's say they're, my typical client is a high powered, highly functioning CEO, professional athlete, whatever, and they've spent a lot of time doing what I guess maybe they're taught to do when they're younger, which is make a lot of money, be quote unquote successful. Everything else takes a back seat. Family takes a back seat. Children take a back seat. Friends take a back seat. Health takes a back seat. And all we care about is making a bunch of money, right? But then they
Hmm.
get to a point in life, usually around middle age, anywhere from, I don't know, 45 to call it 58, 59, something like that, where they begin to realize, frankly, we have more time behind us, guys, than in front of us if you fall into that age group
Yeah.
of really good years. And I think about this all the time. I mean, I'm in my late 40s and I have 2 young children. And sometimes I sit there and I think to myself, I probably have maybe 30 more good summers left,
Hmm.
30 more, springs, 30 more back to school days, 30 more summer trips. And when you think about your life in that way, you develop a massive sense of urgency to get your stuff together quick. And that's the conversation I typically have with my patients first and foremost. Let's light that fire. Let's understand your why. And if you don't
Hmm.
understand your why, this is my job to help you.
Hmm.
There is a clock ticking and it's ticking very quickly because that scenario I just posed to you is best case scenario.
Hmm.
God forbid you get a terminal illness. God forbid you get hit by a car. God
Yeah.
forbid X, Y, or Z happens in the world we live in today, right? So there is a massive urgency to this, guys. And this is how I feel about my life, about my health. And this is what I try to implore in my clients as well. Once they understand, and once everybody understands, like how serious this really is, this is not some sort of, hey, novelty thing where this would be cool if I had a six pack. That's not what this is about. This is about getting your health so dialed in where you prove to yourself psychologically that you have the ability to do what you tell yourself you're going to do, and now your self-esteem and self-confidence skyrockets. You're able to stick to a consistent routine. You can show yourself that. You can show me as your coach that. But more important than that, you show your spouse that. You show
Hmm.
your children that, right? As they grow up, now they see dad is doing push-ups at 6 a.m. every morning. They don't
Mhm.
see dad comes home and drinks a beer at 6 p.m. every day. And I guess that's normal, so I should do it too, right?
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
our children emulate us. Once you understand that, then my clients, meaning anybody listening or watching, frankly, once you understand that, then you will suddenly take the action that you always know you've needed to take. Look,
Yeah.
most of my clients don't necessarily need me to tell them what to do. They know what to do. We all know what to do. I mean,
Yeah.
let's be real. We all know we're not supposed to eat X food at X time of day. We all know where we should work out. We all
Mhm.
know we shouldn't drink a bunch of alcohol, right? But why don't we do it? And I think we
Mhm.
lose sight of the fact that these things are affecting not just us. Like, don't be selfish, right? Like, it's not just us, it's the kids that are watching us, it's our parents, our aging parents, it's our friends, our spouse, our family. And one thing that I really think is important that a lot of people overlook is your physical health and your physiology directly affects your psychology,
Mm,
right? If you're clinically depressed and you need treatment for that, that's great, go do that. But if
right.
you're feeling depressed, or if you're feeling anxious, or if you're feeling reactive, anytime somebody says something to you, you bite their head off and you're just kind of angry and pissed off all the time, maybe it's because you eat processed foods. Maybe it's because you're drinking every night and you're not sleeping well. Maybe it's because
Mhm,
you drag yourself out of bed with a bad attitude going to a job you hate.
mhm,
Maybe it's because
mhm,
you distract yourself buying stuff you don't really want because you don't really know what to do because you feel so bad and you're just hoping you get that little dopamine hit if you spend a bunch of money on something because you don't know what to do, right?
Yeah.
All these things are factored in together. And I think us as South Asians, we understand the mind body connection better than most, frankly.
Mhm.
And once you begin to fix one area and you understand why you need to fix it, everything else kind of falls into place. Super long-winded answer. Sorry about that. But basically,
No, it's
get the
great.
fundamentals in place. And for that, specifically, what I do initially, I focus on sleep for my clients. We look at their overall hormonal balance. I look at their diet and their nutrition, and I look at their physical activity. That's where I
Mhm.
start.
Such great pointers. I wanted to kind of highlight something you said, which really stuck out to me here. Because I think the context and the nuance is important for people to understand, which is you mentioned this concept of urgency. And for most of us, I feel, at least my perception, is that we're always in a hurry to get things done, not
Mhm.
Right.
necessarily things that are truly important, but we want to move on to the next thing. We want to get that email answered. We want dinner on the table. We want the kids to go to bed, whatever. But when I hear you say urgency, I don't hear it from the scarcity mindset of like, it's not enough time. It's not enough time. Go, 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 go. And, swim in cortisol. What I
Right.
hear you say is, no, this is a priority.
Mhm.
Right.
And so I
Right.
just wanted listeners to really get a handle on that because I think sometimes that context gets missed is this is a priority. Here's why. And I really appreciate that you, when you put it in that context of we really don't know. And
Right.
there's no reason to sit there and say we don't have enough time.
Right.
However, we're going to make what time we have really count.
Mhm.
Exactly. Well said. And I appreciate the clarification. And let me kind of piggyback on and say this, which is it's not scarcity. It's actually it's abundance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we have so many things. All of us have so many things that we want to do in our lives, whether it's a hobby, whether it's a trip, whether it's a business you want to start. I'm sure all of us deep in our hearts have all these things that we want to do that we haven't started because of excuse X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But just imagine if you were able to completely optimize your health to the point where you're sleeping very well every night, right? You're in very good shape, you're in good health, which translates into fantastic psychology. Don't necessarily feel depressed. You're not losing that time by those melancholy moods and that anxiety and all that
Yeah.
wasted time and hours and weird conversations maybe you have with people that lead nowhere, right? We've all done that. Like, imagine if all of that time was given back to you because you've respected yourself so much to take care of yourself so much that you can now do these things that you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Not only that, but you can go to the beach, you can take it as a male, you can take your shirt off and you're not going to feel self-conscious or weird about it because you're taking care of yourself. Same thing
Exactly.
applies
Yeah.
to females. Obviously, you're not going to take your shirt off, but you know what
I
I
mean,
mean.
in Italy, or France, you could do it.
Some beaches out here in
Some
California, I
beaches
guess
you
you could
can, you can.
get away with it. But, those little things, right? Imagine not trying to overcompensate for your feelings of your inadequate physical body with expensive designer brands, but
Yeah.
putting on a black t-shirt and just going out because, hey man, you look good, you're happy, it's all good. And you've bought back all this time for yourself to do the things that make you you.
I've known Akash for about a year, and we're pretty good friends. And one thing I know about doctors is they don't like lawyers. So I'm going to put my lawyer hat on. I'm going to depose you because I'm I'm your ideal demographic for your client, right? I'm not a high-powered CEO. I'm not an athlete, but I'm a
Yeah.
man and I'm old, right? I think that's
Funny.
the only qualification. And just to trivialize this a little bit, I want to push back a little bit because
Sure.
there's a lot of hesitancy or resistance into going into this world, and I'm familiar with this world enough that I've been in it for 2 or 3 years, and
Hmm.
how I've everything you say makes sense. But in the past, here are some comments that I want you to address head on. I go to my
Sure.
doctor, I got a $40 copay, does my CBC, my complete blood count, right, and my labs are fine, right. And one thing that I've learned is that in medicine, there is a range of acceptable standards, and
Right.
you're not sick until you fall below that range. And so,
Right.
until you fall below that range, you're not sick, you're fine, there's nothing to do, right? But the
Hmm.
type of work you do is actually, there's a range within a range, there's an optimal range. And the difference between being in the optimal range versus just not sick or not outside of the range is what shows up in a little bit more energy to go get that workout in, right? A little bit more confidence, a little bit more emotional regulation, a little bit more clarity in the morning when you wake up.
Yeah.
And I want you to address a lot of this because it's quite expensive, this type of medicine and the
Hmm.
supplements and the testing and all of that, and it's not paid by insurance. That's what makes it sometimes
Correct.
expensive. But I want you to explain benefits that we're overlooking when we just chalk up our weight to, well, I'm just big boned, I'm always been heavy, right? Or, well, I'm not a morning person, or, well, I have migraines, for example, and just think that that's what we're expected to accept
Sure.
and that there's no hope on the other side. And the reason I'm really passionate about this is because for a number of years, for 20 years or so, I suffered with migraines, and my entire day would be ruined with migraines. And I went to like a dozen neurologists, and I would be taking pills like Topamax, which on the street is called
Sure.
Dopamax, right?
Hmm.
Neurontin, gabapentin, chlorhexazone, which is a muscle relaxer, sleeping
Mm.
pills, on top of 30 Botox shots in my head.
Wow.
And until I found this space of medicine, which generally is functional medicine, it's performance medicine, longevity medicine. My son, when he was 3 years old, would come into my room and say, "Dad, do you have a headache?" And if I said no, he would leave me alone till 1 p.m. And if I said yes, he would jump in bed with me, right? And that really sort of woke me up a little bit
Wow.
of the urgency, which is I was missing out on life
Yeah.
Yes.
because I had been to a dozen neurologists and they all said you have migraines, and we'll keep trying until we find it, like sleep tests, sleep apnea. I went through the whole rigmarole until I found out that this entire world of medicine exists where I can take control of my migraine and actually drive to a solution and not accept that any longer. And the last thing I'll say is that the benefits, even though they were incremental, were exponential when done daily over and over, right? So I'm coming to you as someone who was critical but no longer critical, and I
Yeah.
want you to really drive home this point: why this type of medicine
Yeah.
is so more important than just your once a year physical where you pay a $40 copay and you see your family care physician.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, I didn't know that about you. So first of all, that's wild, man. So you know exactly what I'm talking about when you take
Yeah.
your health into your own hands. That's incredible. Good for you. Um, but yeah, listen, the reality is this. You're right. This is typically not covered by insurance at all. It certainly is expensive, relatively speaking. But I'll talk more about this in a minute. Because is it really? I mean, you're basically taking care of your health. Like, what's more valuable than that? But
Hmm.
just to kind of
Hmm.
like defend traditional medicine for a second, right? You mentioned
Yeah.
the neurologists and the copays and all that. When I started my career, I was obviously right in that system too, right? We took insurance, we did all that stuff. And in a traditional doctor's office, in their defense, it's really run like a high volume business. You almost have to run it in a way where I hate to say it, but like mediocre medicine wins, you know?
Yeah.
Because if you're spending a lot of time with patients, you're going to come out of that exam room and have 30 angry patients waiting for you. And you got to move. You got to move. You got to just move through them, collect the copay, do what you can for that 15 to 20-minute visit and move on. And it's not a doctor issue. Most doctors are actually very good. It's a system issue.
Mm-hmm.
And that particular system, unfortunately, is broken. I mean, look at healthcare today. It's just broken, right? So I wouldn't blame the doctors. I know you're not, but I just want to
Mhm.
point out that it's a system issue, and you're kind of a victim in a way to the doctors are to that system, unless you choose
Yeah.
to, do something different about it, which is kind of what we did. And now
Mhm.
addressing your point, and you're absolutely correct. The small details and the small little tweaks, that's where you win, right? But I mean, healthcare is no different than anything in life. We're all successful professionals talking and most likely listening and watching. We
Mm-hmm.
all know in our respective fields that details matter, right? That's what separates the best from, the good. The good from the great is the details. Like if I'm doing something and I'm just like getting that extra MRI, or I'm just looking at things a little bit deeper and I find this issue, that makes me, or anybody who does that, a potentially better practitioner in that discipline. Same in
Mhm.
your respective fields. It's the details. This is no different. Now, if somebody came to me and said, "Hey, but paid my $40, my primary care doctor said my labs look great. I still feel terrible. Doc, what do you got? What can you do for me?" We're gonna look at the labs that were done in a completely different way than most likely what a traditional medicine doctor or medical doctor would have been taught to look at those labs. We're gonna look at them in a much different way. Number two, most likely we're going to actually run labs that are more expensive, right? Take more time to obtain and review and analyze, and also take more time to provide a comprehensive solution and treatment plan moving forward. This is why it's more expensive, right? I mean,
Mhm.
a car is a car is a car, but there's a reason a Porsche is more expensive than a Kia. They're both
Mhm.
amazing vehicles. Not to take away from any cars at all, but my point is, there are levels to everything that you do.
Mhm.
And look, at the end of the day, what I tell my clients is I'm not cheap at all. And frankly, I never will be, and I don't want to be. And the reason for that is I need to have the ability and the freedom to do what I need to do for this patient. And I can't
Mm-hmm.
have it stuck in my mind that, oh, well, I can only do X, Y, or Z because their insurance won't let me do A, B, or C,
Right.
right? It doesn't work. And the results, frankly, speak for themselves. Like when a patient commits to this type of a program with any provider out there that provides these services, they get better results. There's no doubt
Mm-hmm.
about it. If you commit or invest into an expensive vehicle, you're going to have a better driving experience than you are
Mhm.
otherwise. You're still going to get from point A to point B, but your experience and your results are going to be better. And the reality is, this is the world we live in. There's a cost to that.
Mm-hmm.
But how bad
Mhm.
do you want it? And that's why, again, I stress to patients, I mean, how much time do you think you really have? This is your health. This is like not a novelty. This is a very serious thing, and you can change the course of your life and your feelings in your life. So what's more valuable than that?
Yeah. That's a good point. That's a really good point. And I would almost add on that it's not the moments in your life, but it's the life in your moments. And I think for
I
me,
like that.
what going down this path did was, you know, add just simply more clarity, more vigor, more energy into each moment of my life. And so rather than saying sort of getting by at like a 6 or a 5 or a 7, I was consistently now showing up at an 8.5, a 9,
Hmm.
and just more present for the things, right? Just more
Right.
present for
Mm-hmm.
going to the gym at the end of a long day, or being able to wake up in the morning, um, even at 11 o'clock, banging out some work, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think that the net result for me has not only been success and finances and all that stuff. I think that comes from having better clarity, more mental acuity, more control over your emotions, things like that, but also just simply more life in each moment. Um, each moment is just much richer, in addition to potentially having more moments, right, at the
Yeah,
end, because
totally.
we're taking labs, we're doing X-rays, we're looking for things, and really consistently someone is watching over you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And you know, like people don't necessarily sometimes in the beginning they don't necessarily understand that it's not about the aesthetics, right? Clients will come to me and saying, "Hey doc, I want to get ripped." I just okay, that's that's great. We can do that. But I think when people kind of embark upon this journey with their coach or their provider or whoever, they begin to realize what you just said, Dinesh, which is, I'm looking better, but more important than that, I feel better.
Mhm.
And my life is actually changing. And people want to be around me now. And I want to be around people. And I'm sleeping better. I'm not as angry as I used to be. I can
Yeah.
think clearer. And I just happen to be getting ripped at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's almost like the physical part is a secondary benefit, but the world we live in, it's what draws people towards something like this.
Yeah.
But the beauty of it is the real psychological benefit is the real win. And it's almost like a bonus because people don't expect it.
Yeah, I'm sort of thinking of these people that come in and they are they're at this point where everything's good enough, right? Like in Gujarati, there's a common saying, and it's jalse, right? Chalega. And you're sitting here and you're like, okay, but my question to you really is, what would you say to somebody who's really lived this life? I grew up hearing this word all the time, all the
Mm,
time. The concept was so ingrained in me
mhm.
to, even simple questions like, well, do you want milk in your coffee? Arechalse, like whatever. And which gives you no clarity. And you're sitting here and you're going, okay, but what do you really want?
Right.
Yeah.
And the concept of like, I could have something that I actually enjoy, a richer, fuller, deeper experience of, regardless of what that is. Like, what is your experience with patients in this realm or clients in this realm of
Yeah.
not really believing that there is another level
Yeah.
until, like, do you have like a story or maybe a client testimonial or something that can really paint a picture for this, or just your own
Yeah.
experience?
Yeah. No, it's a good question. And I mean, it's interesting that's kind of a concept I think so many of us grew up with, right? And if you factor in like the expense, like we've talked about, there's more and more potential impediments to pursuing something like this.
Mm-hmm.
But what I really try to stress with my patients and my clients is like, you're right. It is good enough. You could absolutely continue down the road that you're living your life in today and, middle of the road, health wise, I'm talking about. And that's great. There's frankly nothing wrong with that for quite a few people. But, personally speaking, and I think a lot of people that are gravitated towards this type of a service or listen to these types of people, they know there's more, right? They just
Mm-hmm.
either don't know that they're capable of doing it
Mhm.
and they don't want to admit that to anybody, or they just don't know how to do it
Mhm.
because of all the clutter in our society today. And there's so many options on everything, right? But, a particular client comes to mind right now as you say this story to me. He actually came to me more for like PRP, platelet rich plasma, in his lower spine because he was dealing with back pain because he was doing a lot of the heavy lifting after his wife gave birth to their second kid and a lot of physicality, and he just kind of threw his back out. So that's how he initially came to me.
Mm.
We started, he's roughly my age. We started chatting, very, very financially successful guy. And we just started chatting a little bit, and he started, asking me kind of what do I do in the gym and stuff. As we got to know each other, and it kind of comes out with it, and this came out with this guy like, "Hey, man, is anything you think you can do to help me out here?" And I think a lot of us want to ask that question. I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of us are just scared to ask that question, or embarrassed, or maybe I don't know
Mhm.
what. We just think we're going to get laughed at, or ridiculed, or rejected, or whatever the case may be. But he was brave enough to ask that question, right? The guy's in his mid 40s when he signed up. He took 4 or 5 months of his life, which is nothing, a drop in the ocean, right? And he became a completely different human. At the end of this time period, when he kind of completed that module of our course, his wife came in with him one day to a visit. I never met her before. And I'm like, hey, nice to meet you, da da da. And she's like, hey, you changed his life. And his kids changed the way that they look at their life. They work out with dad now, and they just came in like a glowing, happy family. You
Mhm.
know why? it wasn't because of anything I did. It was because
Mhm.
he proved to himself that he could be the man he always wanted to be. I think
Yeah.
we all have this vision of ourselves that lives about 6 months to 12 months ahead of where we are. And I think this comes out like, oh, in 6 months from now, I'm going to be ripped. In
Mhm.
6 months from now, I'm going to be really big because I'm going to start working out. In 6 months from now, I'm going to lose 50 pounds, right? This
Mhm.
version or this vision of ourselves that lives 6 to 12 months ahead of where we are today. My goal is to help people get to that vision today. Because circling back, who knows what's going to happen in 6 months? I mean,
Mhm.
nobody predicted the pandemic. Who knows what's going to happen
Mhm.
after November? I mean, who knows, right? So
Mhm.
chasing this version of yourself for 6 months ahead can be a lifelong chase that people never actually achieve because they're just kind of half-assing their way through it and they're thinking they have more time than they do.
Mhm.
This guy, like I said, was bold enough to do it. If you look at his before and after pictures, completely different humans. You would think I altered it. And his life has completely skyrocketed, his family life, his professional life. He's gotten promoted to an incredibly powerful position. He's now, because he's done so well, his friends have said, hey, so and so, what happened? Those people are
Mhm.
now coming to me as clients, and we're doing the same life transformative experience that he had.
Mhm.
So these types of things, they're not medical in the sense that, oh, hey, I'm going to put you on this regimen of hormone replacement therapy and supplements and this and that, and you're going to look great. Take care, have a nice life. These are
Mhm.
like life transformative, right? These things allow you to break bad habits, create new habits, and just become a different person. You become a
Mhm.
person that you authentically always wanted to be. And
Mhm.
when you do that, I think you teach yourself that you're capable of so much more than you think.
For the modern South Asian man, picture professional, couple of kids, lives in suburbia. Where is his blind spot? Um, where has he gotten a bit comfortable? Where is he ignoring his potential? And what does he need compared to what his father needed when he was in
Mhm.
that spot? Right.
We're very unique in the sense as South Asians. We live a very kind of unique experience. I'm sure probably a similar picture to all of us, but my parents came here from India and really kind of grinded it out, the true American dream, and they made it happen. They were incredible. And their emphasis on their life was never about, I mean, they didn't think about things like what we're talking about. They didn't think
Mhm.
about wearing a whoop. They didn't think about tracking their sleep. Like these things just weren't it's not like they weren't a priority. They weren't even thoughts to become a priority
Right.
because it was all about paying the rent, putting
Mhm.
food on the table, getting your kids educated so they have a better, they have more promise than we did when we came to this country. And, God bless, they did all that. But at least in my case, my parents absolutely suffered health wise.
Yeah.
They were at the point where they were morbidly obese. And I remember this vividly when I was like 6 or 7 years old. They would each eat a pint of ice cream at night watching TV each night.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
they became like just morbidly obese. And thankfully, at this point, I started getting into my health a little bit. So I was able to help them from being like massively diabetic, knocking on death's door to become incredibly healthy people now that don't eat ice cream, don't eat sweets, they walk, they have a great life, and
Amazing.
they look 30 years younger than they are, right? But they had a different set of challenges that we have, frankly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they had much of a choice. I think we're very lucky. Anybody who has the ability to be on your podcast or even listen to their podcast or watch it, probably listening to it in a relatively comfortable car with or at a relatively comfortable office with pretty expensive AirPods in. Most likely that's what's going on, right?
Mm.
So we have a lot to be grateful for. And I think that we have the ability to focus on these types of things of optimizing our health. Now, that all being said, we're still South Asian, and I think a lot of us are still built, myself included, with this intrinsic kind of mindset that like money is king, to be honest with
Mhm.
you. Like that's what a lot of people think in the South Asian community. I'm not saying it's wrong, but I'm saying maybe there's a different way to look at it. And I'm starting to realize in my life, money isn't necessarily king, your health is king because
Mm.
you don't want to be the richest guy in the cemetery when you have a heart attack at 45 years old at your desk, right? South Asians, it's definitely harder because we are raised in a different environment. But I certainly believe our children will have it as a strong priority.
Mm. So good. So good. Akash, you're such a wealth of information, and
Thank you.
you've shared so many nuggets of information here that I think will be absolutely um, important for our audience to hear and get the word out there that we do have the power to take our health into our own hands, especially now with sort of democratization of health information, access to physicians that are not in our neighborhood, right? With Zoom
Yeah.
and telehealth and things like that, we have
Mhm.
access to a lot of resources now. So we can't thank you enough for coming on to the show. We talked about this. We live in an instant gratification world. We want to eat the ice cream today. We want to drink the alcohol today. We want to feel good right now. And sometimes, when we listen to the podcast, like at least I feel motivated. I want to take action right away. But some of these things that we're talking about maybe takes 3-4 months. We've got to find a good provider, things like that. But we've got you here. So tell us one thing that you know beyond a doubt that if our listeners were to implement right away, they can change their lives in short order.
I mean, from a practical standpoint, I think what I would say to that, the number one thing that you can do today that's free, that will cost you nothing and you need no gadgets for, is to sleep. I mean, I would say
Mm.
sleep is probably one of the biggest things that I like to focus on. And there's a number of reasons for that. When you're sleeping, your growth hormone is spiking, your testosterone as a male is being produced. You're getting rid of all these senescent kind of zombie cells you have in your body. Um, you're just kind of refreshing and restoring your central nervous system.
Mhm.
So
Mm-hmm.
if anybody doesn't know where to start and they're maybe even overwhelmed by our conversation today, forget about everything we talked about. Come back to this episode in a month and just focus on getting your sleep dialed in for the next 30 days. Quick tips for that, practical tips for your listeners. Black out the room, keep it really cold in that room. Use an eye shade if you need to. Go to sleep and wake up at the same time every single day. Don't eat any food about 6 or 7 p.m. on, and no caffeine after 2 p.m. Just do those
Mm-hmm.
things for 30 days. Guarantee you'll see something.
Okay, but tell us, how would we know if we're in a sleep deficit? How would we know if like maybe our sleep is on a struggle bus? Because I think everyone is, we've got small kids, we've got jobs, we're traveling, we've got all that stuff, and maybe we're just tired this week or we're exhausted. How do we know if we've got what's a symptom to tell us that, hey, our sleep is not where it should be?
Yeah, I think we're all sleep deprived to some degree. There's no question about it. Real difficulty waking up in the morning is a telltale sign.
Mm,
If you just you're hitting that snooze button over and over and over, your body needs to sleep, and your body knows best, frankly.
Mhm.
Irritability shows up a lot as like irritability, reactiveness, things of that nature in the workplace or at home or with your kids, impatience, things of that nature. And if most of us know this, but if you're in bed for 8 hours, chances are you're not actually sleeping for 8 hours. So if you're
Mm.
one of those people tossing and turning all night, you're not getting enough sleep. So I would say those types of symptoms really kind of suggest strongly that you need a lot more sleep.
As someone who's a female in their early 40s, all the perimenopause and the menopause, and I know you focus on men, but so much of that is coming to light for me. I went to, I'm a healthcare provider formerly in another life, and this is not stuff that they taught us, right? So just understanding that your hormones play a role in it, and it's not as simple as just go to sleep.
Right.
I think is really important. And I like what you said about um, just because you're in bed doesn't mean you're sleeping. So
Yeah.
one thing that I've found beneficial is if I don't have an intention to wind down, I'm not in the bed. Like I don't like hanging
Yeah.
out and just watching TV in bed, physically training your body to say like, oh, I'm in the bed, which now my mind and my body know like it's time to sleep versus
Yeah.
if I just hang out and I work in my bed and then I play games in my bed and then
Yeah.
whatever, it changes and it's confusing for your body to actually understand what you're expecting it to do.
Very good point, Stephen. I'd say two things about that. One, 100%. Your bedroom and your bed should be only for sleep. Like, I actually recommend don't even have a TV in the bedroom. I mean, the second you begin to kind of get into bed, you should be in a situation where you're almost pre-programmed to understand. Your body understands, okay, we're going to bed now. Phone has already gone away. I haven't looked at my phone for an hour. There's no
Right.
TV here. Lights are off. So this is bedtime, right? And the quicker you can program yourself, the easiest way to do that is eliminate all distractions in that room. The quicker you're going to be able to get to sleep faster. Second thing I want to say about that, and you're 110% correct, and I thank you for bringing it up, is your hormones. Absolutely, with females, super important. One area that doesn't necessarily get as much attention as it deserves is hormonal imbalance in females. That's also a part of something that we're beginning to launch here very soon, is really looking at menopausal and perimenopausal symptoms and having a solution for that. And a solution for that primarily foundationally revolves around hormonal balance, including, by the way, hormones like testosterone, which is not just a male hormone. It's vitally important in females. And it can change all of our lives.
So true. So true. Because you think you're crazy, right? Like, and I don't use that term lightly, but
Yeah.
you know, in the friend chats and things like that, what often happens is you ping pong and you're like, well, my kids aren't babies anymore, so why am I not sleeping well? You know,
Yeah.
and is it my husband snoring? Is it too hot? Is it that I'm stressed? Is it that I'm like, you don't know. And then when you realize, oh, it's my hormones, there's no way for me to feel that
Absolutely.
necessarily. There's no way for me to know. And so it just, it's so empowering to understand, like, ooh, if you're starting to see a change in your sleep patterns and you're still doing all of the things you recommended, right? Like clean sleep routine, all of those things.
Yeah.
Hormones are something that we want to start looking at. And I'm just now starting to scratch the surface with this. So hopefully, you know, we'll be able to learn more and share more as we learn more on the podcast.
Yeah.
Ask It Forward listeners, if this is the first time you're tuning in, we have a question left by the previous guest who did not know who they were leaving the question for, what we'd be talking about. They know nothing, and they're just leaving a question for today's guest. And then Akash, today you will hear our previous guest question. And then once you're finished answering, you get to leave a question for the next guest.
I like it.
So our previous guest that we had on the show was Dr. Bileberry, who is all things expert in empathy. So Bile, left for you. What is your intention behind the work you're doing? Is it led by fear or empathy?
I mean, certainly I would say that my intention with doing this is to wake people up and have them understand that there's so much more of a life that they can live by doing small changes in their daily habits. And that time is going to pass anyway, so they might as well kick ass during that time, and they have the power to do it.
So good. Are you ready to share a question for the next guest?
Yeah, that's good. Let me think. Okay, if you could go back to yourself at 20 years old, what is the one action you would tell yourself to not do that you feel would have improved your life?
Such a great question.
Or changed your life, not improved your life, maybe changed your life.
Yeah.
Listeners, we always encourage you guys to reflect on these questions yourself. I know Dinesh and I do, because they're really, really great and really insightful. So I'm going to have to noodle on that one. Thanks.
I will too, actually. It's kind of a interesting one.
That's a good question. I'm even trying to remember, where was I when I was 20 years old? I know I had hair. I was using gel back then.
You and I both.
Yeah, I had my favorite gel. It made my hair smell good. It was a good time. That's all I remember from when I was 20.
We're both very aerodynamic now, though.
We are like Ferraris, right? We are precise.
That's right.
We're Ferraris. We can do it. But I'm so grateful that we got a chance to speak with you. And we can't thank you enough for coming on here and sharing with us what you share with your personal clients and such. But at the Happy and Human podcast, one of the ways that we do thank our guests is by giving them an opportunity to share a cause that's near and dear to their heart, which would raise awareness for those causes. And then we can make a contribution to that organization on behalf of you as a small token of our appreciation for you spending some time with us.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think something in the space of like children's education, right? Because an opportunity that I had when I was younger was education. And I think that altered the course of my life. And the ability to provide that to somebody else would be amazing.
Yeah, if I could suggest one that you can adopt, one of my favorite organizations is Room to Read. And they empower South Asian women to learn how to acquire basic reading and writing skills.
Love it.
Maybe if that's okay with you, we'll make it Room to Read.
Perfect. More
You
than
can make
okay. I
it room
love it.
to read. The other one I would recommend also for listeners, just so you know, and for you, Akash, too, I would really love to share it with you, is Pratham USA, which is also fantastic. My family is heavily involved with supporting this organization because, we do have they have a second chance program for women and girls. 80% of all girls by 8th grade have dropped out in India. And so, Pratham does a great job of providing them with second chance. They have vocational skilling for adults as well.
Love it.
And they focus on early education, both programs, both charities, just so wonderful. So we'll make donations to why not do both chocolate and vanilla? And
I think I'm going to donate as well. That's really, really great.
both organizations, highly, highly fantastic. We are such fans. Dinesh and I cannot stand behind education enough. It's why we're here, and we're so thrilled and honored to be able to support that. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. That was really, really fun. I really appreciate your time. Seriously.
What are you up to? Where can they find you if they want to connect with you or if they're interested in working with you?
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram at Akash Bajaj MD, AKASHBAJAJ MD. On there, I try to post relatively frequently to really put out a lot of value and free information for people to help change their lives. Then I also have a YouTube show. We're on about once a week or so. It's called One on One with Dr. Bajaj. And you can find that on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.